So now that you are all warmed up, I'm going to share a story with you about some creatures from the forest, and you've already practiced being in sections, so I think you can do it. You think you can help me? Yes, okay. So we're going to start over here. This whole section here, the choir's over there, they're kind of lively, so I'm just going to give you all one big section. You are going to be my birds. So when I say the word birds, what might you say? We didn't even practice. Okay, so birds. Perfect. Okay, and then we're going to kind of split this wild section up over here, so like kind of toward the middle. If you really identify with the middle, you're welcome to join them. And you are my rabbits. Rabbits. And rabbits, we don't really teach kids that rabbits have a say sound, so we're just going to say hop, hop, hop. Got it? So rabbits. Perfect. Okay, and then if you are not identified with a previous animal, you are going to be my, I gotta turn the page and see what animal you are. Bees. Ah, you got it. See, y'all are so smart. Okay, so I'm just gonna, birds, bunnies, bees. Oh, we are ready for our story. Okay, so once upon a time, far away, deep in the forest, there lived a whole bunch of animals. There was a squirrel. And there was an owl. There were also birds, rabbits, bees, and a whole bunch of other animals too. And every day, each of the animals would move along, doing what forest animals do, and all was well. Now, the squirrel liked to sit in a tree and watch the other animals go by, doing things that each of them do. And in the hustle and bustle of the forest, the squirrel found happiness. But one day, as often happens in stories, there was a problem. You see, the squirrel, who had been watching all the other animals in the forest for some time, decided that she wanted to be creative. All the other animals seemed to be creative, but she, just a simple squirrel, was not. She watched the birds as they built their nests. The birds gathered materials from near and far, and then the birds would assemble their beautifully intertwined creative nests. The squirrel loved the birds' nests so much that she tried to create one of her own. But no matter how hard the squirrel tried, she could not make a creative nest like a bird. So she walked away. Next, the squirrel came to the burrows that the rabbits had made. The rabbits worked hard to find a place to make their home. Then the rabbits would dig multi-roomed creative burrows. The squirrel admired the rabbits' burrows so much that she tried to create one of her own. But no matter how much the squirrel dug, she could not make a creative burrow like a rabbit. So she walked away. We're guessing where she goes next, right? Okay, we didn't practice this either. She decided to watch the bees flying back and forth. The bees gathered pollen and nectar from near and far, and then the bees would gather all of their pollen and nectar to create honey. The squirrel loved that the bees made honey, because not many animals in the forest made their own food. It was so creative. So the squirrel tried to gather pollen and create honey of her own, but no matter how hard the squirrel tried, she could not gather pollen. It just made her sneeze. She could not be creative and make her own food like a bee. So she walked away. The squirrel was sad. She wanted to be creative like the birds, the rabbits, and the bees, but she just couldn't figure out how. Maybe she wasn't meant to be creative at all. The squirrel climbed back up into her tree and began to cry. Then she heard the owl say, Who is crying? Go ahead, owl. Is crying. I am, said the squirrel. Go for it, squirrel. I am. But why are you crying, said the owl. Why? The squirrel explained to the owl that she wanted to be creative like the birds, but she couldn't build a nest. She tried to be creative like the rabbits, but she couldn't dig a burrow, and she tried to be creative like the bees, but she couldn't collect pollen or make honey. The owl listened patiently, and when the squirrel was done, said, "Well, of course you couldn't do those things, squirrel. Of course you could. You are not a bird, a rabbit, or a bee. You are a squirrel." So you have to be creative in your own way. But how can that be? Asked the squirrel. How can that be? I'm not creative at all. I'm not creative at all. Yes, you are, replied the owl. Yes, you are. What do you do with all the nuts and seeds that you find? Well, I hide them, of course, answered the squirrel. Well, I have them, of course. That's what feels right for me. That's what feels right for me. Yes, but it's very creative, the owl went on. You're the only animal in the forest who does that. And do you know what happens to the seeds and nuts that you don't come back for? Well, no, I guess I don't, said the squirrel. Those seeds become trees and flowers and bushes, answered the owl. Yes. And those flowers become a place to gather nectar and pollen for the bees. The bushes become protective cover for the dens of the rabbits. And the trees become twigs for the nests of the birds. Your own creativity helps others be creative too. You think I'm creative? Asked the squirrel. You think I'm creative? Yes, I do, answered the owl. Yes. And you really should listen to me because I've been told I'm very wise. The squirrel looked around. She had never thought that just by being herself and doing what felt right to her in her soul that she was being creative. But as she watched the other animals, she realized that the owl was right. She couldn't be creative in the way that the other animals were because she had to be creative in her own way. And even though she didn't always feel very creative, she was, just by being herself. The squirrel turned back to the owl and said, "Thank you." She climbed back down out of her tree and decided to go be creative, not like a bird, not like a rabbit, not like a bee, but creative like a squirrel. The end.